Red line in this country. You can't do this to political campaigns.
President Trump is hosting a dinner with governors at the White House. The group is expected to talk about border security and ways on keeping communities safe.
He promised it on the campaign trail he was elected on. This needs to get done.
I went for long walks in the woods. I had my fair share of Chardonnay. I practiced yoga and alternate nostril breathing. No, I'm not over it.
The NASCAR champ is racing to the White House today. President Trump welcoming Martin Truex Jr., the first time that a NASCAR champion has visited the White House under the Trump administration.
Live from our town, currently, New York City. Live from Studio F in our town. It's Fox and Friends with our friend, Abby Huntsman, who is in for Ainsley, who is traveling back from the royal wedding.
What a week she's had.
No kidding. By the way, what a run you've had, too. This is like
I'm still here, you guys.
Straight
I'm still
hours.
on the couch.
Have you ever left?
I live here now. I have a cot over the room over there.
Is that what that was over there?
Yeah.
But you know what? We have a lot to discuss
What
today.
a 24 hours it's been since I was on this couch yesterday morning, right?
Right. I mean, the
You
president.
miss a little, you miss a lot.
Yeah.
The president has not let up because he has just had it ever since it came out that there was. And by the way, the New York Times buried it in a very long story that they actually, the FBI did put somebody in to infiltrate the Trump campaign to try, in my words, to try to bring out any type of Russia connection. First it was to Carter Page, then it was to Papadopoulos. Now we know the Cambridge professor's name. We probably won't use it. Not that everyone doesn't know it. We know that he has links and had other problems with spying on other campaigns. But it looks as though we're starting to see the genesis of an investigation that maybe should have never taken place.
So now the president is saying, I call on the DOJ to investigate the FBI for infiltration. Here's what he tweeted out yesterday. He said, I hereby demand and will do so officially tomorrow, which is today, that the Department of Justice look into whether or not the FBI DOJ infiltrated or surveilled the Trump campaign for political purposes. And if any such demands or requests were made by people within the Obama administration, because remember, all of this happened days leading up to the election, all under former President Barack Obama.
Absolutely. Now, okay, so you think, oh, that's good. So you've got this guy, this Michael Horowitz, you can look into whether or not the FBI did something inappropriate. I saw Mark Meadows on Twitter said, look, the Department of Justice cannot investigate itself. And in fact, when you think about it, the Inspector General has no subpoena power. He will not be able to call in anybody who has left the government. Can't call in Comey, talk to Comey or McCabe or Lynch.
You could call him, they don't have to come.
Well, right. He's got no subpoena power. So, I mean, it is toothless. I just got a note from somebody who used to work at the Department of Justice and said this is a sham. Nonetheless, Congressman Devin Nunes, who it sounded like wanted to go to the Department of Justice on Friday to pick up some documents, but they weren't going to hand them over. He said that if these stories are true, and there was an FBI informant who paid money, $3,000, to George Papadopoulos to get close to the campaign, that would be crossing a red line that would be really bad.
If they ran a spy ring or an informant ring and they were paying people within the Trump campaign, if any of that is true, that is an absolute red line. There is not an honest person in this country who can believe that taxpayer dollars going to fund this ring and operate like this, like what's said in the New York Times. You can't do this to political campaigns. I mean, this was done, according to them, this was done in the spring. I mean, before the counterintelligence investigation was even open. If that's true, we need to know about it.
By the way, it looks as though they're being cooperative. Many people might be cynical, but Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, when he got that, what Abby just read, when he heard that tweet, or read that tweet, he said, if anyone did infiltrate or surveil participants in a presidential campaign for inappropriate purposes, we need to know about it and take appropriate action. And that's what Rod Rosenstein looks like. Jonathan Swan speculates in Axios, saying, look, read between the lines. the president would not be unhappy if Jeff Sessions or Rod Rosenstein decided to resign because of this.
Right.
Because he feels as though he's right. And if they can't do a good job or they feel as though they're breaching lines of protocol, then leave.
Look, there's a real difference when you go to the early days of when the spy was set out to look out on aides of the Trump campaign. There's a difference in gathering intel and gathering hard evidence that could ultimately lead to investigation and straight on opposition research because you simply don't like a person. And that's what we're seeing more and more. It's leading towards.
But the FBI shouldn't be doing that, right?
Right.
So if Hillary Clinton wants to get opposition research, game on. Same thing with President Trump. Someone says, I got something on someone who was Secretary of State internationally. Guess what she had as a job for 4 years? International relations. Guess what you want to show? That she wasn't good at that job. Guess who knows it? The people that interacted with her. It's totally logical. Let's just this one thing on the Cambridge thing. If I could just add this. There's Papadopoulos and Carter Page. This is unbelievable. With Papadopoulos getting paid what Steve referred to, it was this. This Cambridge professor says, hey, you write a lot about energy in the Mediterranean. I'd like to pay you $6,000 or $3,000 to write a paper on that. And I'd like you to come to London, and I'll pay all our expenses. At which time, they have a lunch, and they probe in and out what he knows about Clinton emails or Russia hacking. He's got nothing. A frustrated 73-year-old professor with a history of spying on campaigns strikes out. The same thing with Carter Page. Shows up, starts talking to Carter Page. Never talks about Carter Page and what he's up to and what he's looking for. So these two satellite people, who the president probably couldn't pick out in a lineup,
totally
if they weren't on television, isolated, are now being targeted by this professor.
But and hats off to the Daily Caller. They had the guy's name out there like 3 weeks ago. So the story's been out there. This is why it's so substantial, because we were told. And it blows up the entire official narrative that we've heard from the Department of Justice. And that is, we were told that it all started with that drunken meeting with Alexander Downer, the Australian diplomat, with George Papadopoulos in that bar in London. If this timeline is true, this investigation started way before that. So that lends the question, can you really trust the Department of Justice, the people who are doling out these facts? Because so far, this explodes their timeline, and they don't like it. The other thing about this is, if you think about it, why would the President of the United States have to ask the Attorney General and the Department of Justice to do their job?
Right.
If they knew that somebody was trying to infiltrate a campaign to impact a presidential election, the Attorney General should have done something about that a long time ago. But of course, he is currently recused and AWOL.
And by the way, the president can declassify all of this information that's being asked by Gowdy and Nunes from the FBI. He has the power to do that. It'll be interesting to see in the next days and next weeks if he ultimately does that, if we don't get the information that they've been asking for.
And then we could get all that stuff, including, and the House Republicans asked for it last week, they want the FISA information and they want the scope memo. They want to know exactly what the scope of the investigation was. So that would tell them all about it, and that would open up the timeline once again. When did you start?
A lot of important questions.
Just add this. Alexander Downer, I know you guys know this, wrote a $25 million check to the Clinton
Australian
Foundation,
ambassador,
who just happened to be talking to Papadopoulos, and they had a few glasses of wine in London. And this all spurred on a conversation with a Malta professor. This is insane to think that we're going to drill down to that point to investigate a Republican candidate, a Malta professor, a conversation with an ambassador, a 73-year-old Cambridge professor leads back to Donald Trump going together with the Russians.
But then apparently one of the other stories regarding this professor is that he said to Papadopoulos, now tell me about the email. Tell me about what do you know about the Russian email? And he goes, I don't know anything about the Russian.
Right. Well, Brian, you mentioned Hillary Clinton earlier. She's still out and about. She was at Yale University yesterday, still talking about the election. Here's what she had to say.
A Russian hat. If you can't beat them, join them. I am thrilled for all of you. Even the three of you who live in Michigan and didn't request your absentee ballots in time. No, I'm not over it. I still think about the 2016 election. I still regret the mistakes I made. I still think, though, that understanding what happened in such a weird and wild election in American history will help us defend our democracy in the future.
So then she puts on a Russian hat and she says, if you can't beat them, you join them.
Yeah, she said, as a person, I'm okay, but as an American, I'm concerned. There's the Russian hat right there. Keep in mind, Yale has this tradition on class day where you have some crazy hat.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
she was following through on that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Trying to make
But
a little joke.
The headline there, she's not over it.
Not over it.
All right.
What happened, Brian?
She's not over it.
Yeah, let's go through that again. But you sold a lot of books. That's a good
Yes,
part,
she
Jillian.
did.
I guess so. Good morning to you
Jillian.
guys. It's the first time I heard her say the mistakes I made, though.
Yeah, it's true.
Interesting.
Yeah, she usually follows it up with, but.
But,
they
right.
robbed me.
Okay. Good morning, guys. Let's get you caught up on some of the other headlines that we're following right now, starting with this. Texas Governor Greg Abbott calling for a statewide moment of silence today to honor the 10 victims of the Santa Fe high school shooting. The first of those victims laid to rest. Sabika Sheikh was an exchange student from Pakistan, her host family remembering her.
I had no idea what God was going to send us. But he sent us one of the most precious gifts that I've ever had in my life.
She loved us, and she was the most amazing person I've ever met.
Meantime, new video surfacing of the shooter dancing at his family's church just days before the massacre. We're also learning really disturbing details that he cheered as he carried out that rampage. We expect to learn more at a press conference later today. A father accused of intentionally slamming his Jeep into a restaurant, killing his own daughter and daughter-in-law, is due in court today. Restaurant staff say Roger Self had his family seated, then went outside and crashed into the building in North Carolina, west of Charlotte. The comprehensive strategy involves reimposing sanctions and comes almost 2 weeks after President Trump withdrew from the Iran deal. Former President George H.W. Bush arriving in Maine for the summer for the first time in 73 years, though, without his wife by his side. Dozens of well-wishers greeting Bush on his way to the family vacation home in Kennebunkport, cheering and waving American flags. The 41st president was hospitalized last month in Houston for a blood infection the day after his wife Barbara's funeral. But as you remember, after that, he said, I want to go to Maine this summer.
Right. And isn't it great the cast of Hamilton last week came and performed for him?
I saw
The
that.
whole
How
cast.
sweet.
How unbelievable
Yeah.
was that?
I think the people of Maine were as happy to see him as
I'm sure.
them.
One of his favorite places on earth.
Yep.
So glad he's doing better.
Yeah,
Thanks,
family goes
Jillian.
back there forever.
Thank you. All right.
All right. Meanwhile, as more details emerge about the FBI informant on the Trump campaign, our next guest wants to know, where was President Obama when all of this was happening? James Freeman of the Wall Street Journal here live. That looks exactly like him.
It does. And the Billboard Music Awards takes up gun control.
I'm so sick of moment of silence. Like, God, it's not working. Why don't we do moment of action? Why don't we do moment of change? Why don't we change what's happening?
There's more. We'll have that coming up.
All right, President Trump demanding answers to reports the FBI infiltrated his campaign with this Cambridge professor at the request of the previous administration, or at least their intelligence operatives. And now the Wall Street Journal asking an op-ed, where in the world was President Obama during all this, adding that he's been largely absent from all this drama, the spying drama. James Freeman is the assistant editor for the Wall Street Journal editorial page, Fox News contributor, joins us now. James, what do you think? What prompted you to say to write about this?
Well, it's interesting that the man in charge has remained strangely absent from this story as it's rolled along. Now, obviously, this is typical where a former president kind of gets off stage and doesn't comment too much, but this is an issue that really goes to the core of our democracy. And now as we learn more about the Obama administration surveillance of a U.S. political campaign, the natural question is, what did Obama have to do with it, the man who was in charge?
I mean, we have this; these reports have been confirmed. Even the New York Times says that they've activated this American in London to try to get the most out of Carter Page and Papadopoulos. Is it possible that Brennan and Comey don't know this? No, they know this. Is it possible that they don't tell the president?
Yeah, don't call it spying. It's we're supposed to call it an informant, but not spying. But this is the big question: is you go back to summer 2016, spring 2016. Was it earlier? We need to know, when did this all begin, and wouldn't it naturally be a presidential level decision to begin spying on a U.S. political campaign? You would think so. Now, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was Clapper or Comey or Comey deciding on their own to do this. Well, it seems to me that President Obama might want to weigh in at this point and say, I didn't authorize that. I don't know why they went forward with it. Or maybe was there a moment where he learned about it while in office and he said, what the hell are you doing spying on a U.S. political campaign?
Which would have been great. And maybe there might be some record of this. But I also just think it's worth noting that on January 5th, they had a meeting where everyone was briefed on the dossier. And on January 20th, Susan Rice Wood feverishly went down and documented the January 5th date of when everyone knew about the dossier and what the Trump campaign might have been up to. And we also know in September, the president saw Vladimir Putin and said, hey, knock it off. Wasn't effective. He didn't. But we don't know what happened prior to that. Is it conceivable that John Brennan, his former national security advisor, wouldn't feel as though the president should know that? Now, Ronald Reagan had the reputation of somebody that was detached, remember? He let his people go run wild. He was more of a figurehead. We know that wasn't true, but that was the reputation. Barack Obama never had that reputation.
No, we saw in the struck page texts this comment that the president wants to know everything we're doing. Now, it's not entirely clear what they were referring to, but certainly he gave the impression of someone who was a more hands-on manager. But maybe not. Maybe this really is unelected government run amok. And I think we would want to hear from him his opinion of that. Was there a moment where he found out they had gone too far and he addressed it, or did he learn about it and just accept it?
James, lastly, we have 10 seconds left, but he gets briefed every day in the intelligence report. This would have to come up.
You would think if this is not a presidential level decision, I don't know what is.
James Freeman writes more about it in the Wall Street Journal. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Great to see you.
Thanks.
All right, 10 minutes before the bottom of the hour, we move ahead. The White House is about to ban clinics like Planned Parenthood from using your tax dollars to fund abortion. This one is personal for Dr. Nicole Saphier. She shared her story right here on Fox and Friends. That story next, and she's sharing the response she was been getting. Let's listen.
My decision to go forward with my pregnancy can't be marginalized to political or religious rhetoric. It was just my journey.
Three tons of supplies, much needed, now on their way to the International Space Station. About an hour ago, orbital ATK launching NASA cargo into space from Virginia. A new and deadly threat, meanwhile, coming from that erupting volcano in Hawaii. In other news, scorching lava from the Kilauea volcano is gushing into the ocean, forming something called blaze, sending acid and volcanic glass particles into the air. The gas mixture can irritate eyes and lungs and skin and keep tourists from going to that island. All right, Abby, over to you.
Thank you, Steve. All right, well, President Trump taking steps to stop your tax dollars from funding abortion providers. The White House set to resurrect a Reagan-era rule which bans clinics like Planned Parenthood from using federal dollars to fund abortion. But this story is a personal one to a familiar face on this show, Dr. Nicole Saphier. She shared her personal story with us yesterday on the show, and here's what she told us.
As a senior in high school, I found myself amongst the unpopular statistic of being pregnant. My decision to go forward with my pregnancy can't be marginalized to political or religious rhetoric. It was just my journey.
That story inspiring so many of you, and Dr. Saphier is back with us. We could not bring you back this morning after listening to you yesterday.
Well, I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, well, just for people that weren't watching yesterday, you got pregnant, you had the baby 6 weeks before you graduated high school. Wasn't something you had planned on.
That's right.
And it changed you forever.
Of course it did. And, you know, my decision was my own decision, and it would vary for any woman making the same decision, but it was a choice that I made. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I had people around me saying you couldn't do it or your life wasn't going to be the same, but you're the only person who can change that and prove them all wrong. And so we did.
Yeah. And now he is a shining light in your life. He's
Wonderful.
graduating high school soon.
Yes,
He's
he
not
is.
a little boy
He's
anymore.
Going down to Ole Miss
Look
at
how
the end of the
adorable
summer.
he is,
Very
yeah.
excited.
And you guys have such a beautiful family.
Thank
we love you on the show. But the responses have been pouring in, people that have related to your story or just inspired by it in some way. I want to read some of these. Dwayne on Twitter said, didn't know your story. I really admire and appreciate you for sharing. I agree with you. Don't blame life for the challenges it gives you. Build character with the way you choose to handle your challenges. You are truly an example and inspiration. Thanks again for sharing. And this one's from Kathy, says, thank you for speaking out for life. I volunteer for a young moms group through a local pregnancy center and see potential in all our single moms. Finally, John on Twitter says,
Wonderful.
I watched and I cheered. You are a great example to young girls who find themselves with a difficult decision to make. If your story helps just one girl decide to have her baby, it will be worth it. What is your response to those?
I mean, those are overwhelming, and they're just wonderful to hear. And, you know, I don't necessarily think of myself as an inspirational story, but I do know that making hard decisions in life and overcoming obstacles really can motivate people. And I, too, hope if one person is just motivated to just get up in the morning because of something I've said, then it's a win for me.
Yeah, we're talking about this at the same time the Trump administration is wanting to resurrect the Ronald Reagan era policy with Planned Parenthood, or just not sending money to clinics that tell women to get abortions or to send them places to get abortions. You say that you think it's a good idea.
Well, you know, it's mixed feelings in the sense that I think it's an okay idea because I think Planned Parenthood did this to themselves. They've really muddied the water. They do provide essential health services, cancer screenings, STD treatments, vaccinations, but they also provide controversial abortions under the same roof. They shouldn't have done that. They shouldn't be spending all of these tens of millions of dollars lobbying. They should be spending that money to separate the services so they're not taking away essential health services just because the Trump administration is threatening to support religious freedom and not having taxpayers fund abortions. They should be separating these entities.
Can I just say that you might have had a child in high school, but you have an MD in front of your name?
Behind my name.
Behind your name. I mean, no one can tell you that you can't make the most of your life no matter what
Absolutely.
comes.
You are in charge of your life.
Yeah. Well, it's an important debate, and it will keep being had. There are people on both sides of this aisle, folks, that said they don't want their taxpayer money to go to fund abortions. And then Planned Parenthood is saying, well, this is taking away choice for women.
And that's not right. They shouldn't be doing that. They should have separated these services long ago.
Yeah. All right. We'll leave it right there. Dr. Nicole
Thank you.
Saphier with an MD at the end of her name.
you.
Great to have you on this
Great
morning,
being
as
here.
always. And we always love your family as well.
Thank you.
All right. Coming up on the show, former CIA Director John Brennan now firing a warning shot at GOP leaders after President Trump orders an investigation into whether the FBI infiltrated his campaign. Dan Bongino says it is Brennan who has destroyed the faith in the intelligence community. He is here. He is fired up. And that means something. If you know Dan Bongino, he's up next. And a former mayor of New Orleans now being awarded for tearing down history. That story, that's coming up. Stick with us on a Monday morning.
Speaking of bad blood, there seems to be a little bad blood between this administration and the last one. Let's bring in Dan Bongino, former New York City police officer, former Secret Service guy, host of the Dan Bongino Show. He's an NRA contributor and somehow is able to squeeze us into part of his day. Good morning to you.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, morning, guys. How you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Speaking of bad blood, John Brennan, who used to run the CIA, he sent out an ominous tweet yesterday after it was announced that the Department of Justice would look into whether or not the Obama administration did anything inappropriate. And it says this: Senator McConnell and Speaker Ryan, if Mr. Trump continues along this disastrous path, you will bear major responsibility for the harm done to our democracy. You do a great disservice to our nation and the Republican Party if you continue to enable Mr. Trump's self-serving actions. So the question to you, Dan Bongino, why is John Brennan talking like that?
John Brennan's panicking, Steve. John Brennan has disgraced himself. He's disgraced the country. He's disgraced the intelligence community. He is the one man largely responsible for the destruction of Americans' faith in the intelligence community and in some people at the top of the FBI. Steve, Brennan started this entire debacle with Trump. We now know that Brennan had pretty detailed knowledge of the dossier. I'll walk you through this real slow. Okay. He knows about the dossier. He denies knowledge of the dossier. He briefs the Gang of Eight up in the Hill about the dossier, which they then use to demand the FBI start an investigation into Trump. It is that simple. This guy is the genesis of this whole debacle.
Well, who told him to do it? Who told him to start it?
We think, based on some of my investigation and for the book we're putting together on this, that he just didn't like Donald Trump, but got information through unofficial channels, through people who were involved with British intelligence. They were basically using unofficial channels, Steve, to launder information like you would launder money. Because if they put it through official channels, something would have happened. You know what that one thing is? They would have had to verify the information before they used it, and they didn't want to because this was a political hit job. This was not an intelligence investigation.
I noticed that Ben Rhodes has gone silent. A lot of the people that was doing so much talking a year ago, they're questioning about stuff, they've seemed to have gone quiet. John Brennan sounds like a $3 pundit, just somebody just ranting and raving as if we're getting closer and closer to hitting a nerve. Who are the people that would know if John Brennan was doing this? Would Clapper be one to know? Would Comey be one to know? Would the president be, President Obama be one to know that this was going on?
I believe John Carlin at DOJ, Jim Clapper. I believe Loretta Lynch had detailed knowledge. Of course, Comey knew what was going on in this. There was a very small working group of people who were involved in this political hit job on Donald Trump. But at this point, here's the problem, Brian. The reason Brennan's panicking and a lot of others have gone silent is they're not just worried about reputational harm. Brennan's disgraced himself. He knows history's not going to be kind to him. They're worried about staying out of jail. There were criminal leaks here, criminal leaks, felonious criminal leaks of of information. Someone was responsible.
Well, we may just be scratching the surface even at this point. Do you remember that Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf? Remember back in February, she warned people in her area, illegals, about an ICE raid coming and to do what you need to do to protect yourself. Well, the president mentioned her in this roundtable that he had last week when he had mayors and law enforcement talking about sanctuary cities in California. And he spoke about this mayor. She's now responding to the president. This was a couple days ago in the Washington Post, an op-ed. She says, Mr. President, I am not obstructing justice. I'm seeking it. I wanted to make sure that people were prepared, not panicked, and that they understood their legal rights as mayor. It is my duty to protect my residents. It is my duty to call this administration anti-immigrant fear-mongering for what it is, a racist lie. So she's saying it is my duty, Dan, to protect illegal immigrants.
Over citizens.
Yeah, shame on me. I thought her duty was to protect the legal residents of her county and the tax-paying base and the citizens who actually finance her job and her government. I mean, call me crazy, but I thought that was job number one for her. Apparently not. But Libby Schaaf's another one who has some legal concerns here, too. I believe she should be investigated for obstructing justice here. You know, what about those ICE agents who showed up at doors to deport people in the country illegally, lawbreakers, by the way, who now, apparently some of these lawbreakers had a heads up what they were coming. What happened if one of them, God forbid, would have gotten hurt? I mean, this is serious stuff. This isn't a joke. Maybe she should think about that the next time she warns people in the country illegally about law enforcement officers coming to interview them or potentially bring them into the justice system.
Look who the governor is. The governor made it a sanctuary state, so the governor says this is, she's just saying, I'm answering my superior.
Yeah, well, you know, Moonbeam has a reputation, Moonbeam Brown, of course, of, making it up as he goes along. And this is interesting. He's another one who swore to uphold the rule of law and just seems to have ignored it because they're obsessed with just defeating Donald Trump and catering to their far left base.
Well, if the people of California didn't like it, they could vote him out, but we haven't seen that so far. All right.
Dan, always fired up for us. Great to see you this Monday morning. Have a good day.
You got it.
All right.
You got it. You too.
21 minutes before the top of the hour, and Jillian's got some news for you.
Hey, That's right. Good Monday morning to you guys, to you at home as well. The leader of ISIS on a chilling new mission, brainwashing school children. One of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi's former officers but U.S. officials believe he's still alive. A former mayor of New Orleans awarded for tearing down history. Democrat Mitch Landrieu given the JFK Profile and Courage Award after taking down statues of Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis, and 2 others. Landrieu went ahead with the move despite legal challenges and arguments the Confederacy is an important part of New Orleans' heritage. A mother turning her 14-year-old son in for stealing from a blind man. Police say the boy posed as a cop and pretended to help the man before snatching his wallet inside a New York City subway. The victim's credit card was quickly charged $500 at a nearby store. The teen arrested but has since been turned over to his family. Pop star Kelly Clarkson calling for gun control at the Billboard Music Awards. The host says she was instructed to hold a moment of silence for the victims of the Santa Fe school shooting, but she refused.
I'm so sick of moment of silence. Like, God, it's not working. Why don't we do moment of action? Why don't we do moment of change? Why don't we change what's happening? Because it's horrible. We need to do better. So people are failing our children. We're failing our communities. We're failing their families.
Later in the show, Parkland shooting survivors joining Shawn Mendes and Khalid on stage to perform. Let's look at your headlines. Send it back to you.
Got a little political.
I didn't even know that show was on.
Yeah,
I didn't either. I'm so out of the loop these days.
If you get a Billboard award, no one watches. Do you hear it?
Yeah.
They need a billboard to announce the Billboard Awards.
All right.
Meanwhile, we've got Janice Dean standing over. And Janice, it has been so rainy the last couple of days.
No, Janice, the sun came out yesterday briefly, but it came out.
And you know what? We're going to have the sunshine this week as well. Okay? Did you see my horse this weekend?
Giddy up.
Oh, my gosh. Justified did it again. We'll see you at the Belmont. Current temperatures, not really my horse. 58 in New York City, 50 in Chicago. I wish it was my horse. Here's the past 24 hours. So rain in the forecast across the Mississippi River Valley, the Ohio Valley, parts of the southeast. So the eastern third of the country still going to be unsettled. But look at the northeast. We're going to dry out here for the next couple of days. A nice 77 here in New York City. It's going to be sort of warm and humid across Houston and the Gulf Coast, 78 in Kansas City. We're going to see more rain across the Rockies and the potential for flooding, flood advisories for not only the Rockies, but the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. Look at that forecast, Abby, Brian, and Steve.
Beautiful.
There's the sun. Voila. Back to you.
Average high, 69.
Nice.
Up to the 80s by the end of the year.
I'm rooting for your horse, though, Janice.
Me
I think you're the good luck charm. I really do.
The Belmont in 2 weeks. Yeah. It's happening. Hats are going to be out. Yeah. Giddy up.
Love it. All right, we've got a big show still ahead, a big 2 hours still on the show.
Yeah, you got Alan Dershowitz is going to be coming up fresh off a big debate yesterday. Candace Owens, one of the hottest personalities and pundits out there. Jonathan Turley's here. He went to college for law. Dana Lash will be here, always making news.
Wow.
Plus, the Trump administration just declared the trade war with China on hold. So what does it mean for your wallet? Stuart Varney says keep an eye on your 401k. It's going to go through the roof today.
Brian, how do you explain Stuart?
I can't explain Stuart.
How was the royal wedding? Were you happy about it?
I was very.
Quick headlines now. A burglar ransacks a house, but makes sure the family's dog is okay. You see the pup wandered out of the house after the crook left it open in Massachusetts. The crook noticed and called the dog back inside before making a run for it. And police officers came to the rescue of a man being trailed by a pig.
He was walking home from the train station in Elyria, and a pig started to follow him.
The man called 911 for help. What else could he do? Because he had no idea what to do. Police say they thought the caller must have been drunk, but he was completely sober. Zoe, which is the name for every pig, the pig was back and returned to her owner. So we'll keep up to date with that story, even if we have to interrupt our next guest, Stuart Varney.
I'm glad all's well now. Thank you, Brian. All right, the media has been sounding the alarm for months now on the impending trade war between the U.S. and China.
Concern is growing what a war of words between the U.S. and China, whether it could escalate to a full-blown trade war.
The threat of a trade war poses a grave threat to the rural voters that back President Trump.
A tariff tit for tat teetering on a trade war.
Trade war fears rattling Wall Street today.
It's not just what's going to happen to consumers, but will this spark a trade war?
Meanwhile, Secretary of the Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, confirmed yesterday that the trade war is on hold and that the two nations have reached a tentative deal to cut trade deficits. Just no number at this point.
Yeah, Steve Mnuchin's a disaster on trade, and more on this is Stuart Varney of Fox Business Network.
What?
Steve Mnuchin should not be leading this trade negotiation. He's caving like a cheap suit.
Is that your opinion? Your
Absolutely.
considered opinion here?
Believe me, he can't even get he left his trade team and left America out to dry.
May I give you the other side of the coin, the more rational side of the coin for one second,
I'm
Brian?
talking about the real side.
Oh, okay. Let me give you the other side anyway. This is not now and never was a trade war, much as the left would have loved to have seen it become a trade war because they hate Trump and they want to make him look bad. It's not a trade war. It's a long-term negotiation where our government and their government are trying to work out a new and balanced trade relationship, the most important trade relationship in the world, China and the United States. And now we've got a truce. Wait a second. What we are saying,
truce works for them.
Wait a second. We are saying we'll put these tariffs, which we had proposed, we'll put them on hold.
Right.
Meanwhile, you guys, you've committed to buying more from us.
Wow.
They won't put
Soybeans?
Wait a minute. What do you mean? What do you want? What do you want? Some kind of dramatic
I want intellectual property theft to stop,
They'll
and he
get
doesn't
to
even
it.
know what he's doing.
Wait a minute.
Leave
They
it to
will-
Peter Navarro and Robert Lighthizer, not the Treasury Secretary with no international trade experience.
All you're doing is pointing out that there is a difference of opinion within the United States trade
One
delegation.
doesn't know what he's doing, and the other guys do.
We have a truce in this dispute at the moment, and it's
China's
working
winning.
very much to our
China's
favor.
winning.
How can you say that?
What have we got? They buy more of our stuff that we already made in a short term. In the meantime, they steal electronics, international good. This is a chance to take them on, and the president's being led down.
Stuart, does the president need to do more?
Wait a second. How do you know that the theft of intellectual property, the issue, will not come up more in the future? It will. How do you know that the technology transfers from us to them won't come up in the future? Of course it will come up in the future. Don't expect an immediate end to this. We've got a truce. Celebrate. Your 401k, as of this morning, will be worth a whole lot more.
Short term. I'm thinking long term.
Oh, you're long term.
I'm thinking about the short term, the long term, to rebalance our countries. This is an opportunity.
Stuart, there never was a trade war. It was all in negotiation.
Precisely.
And
The
maybe
negotiations
classic art of the
continue,
deal, right?
And we've got a truce, and you should be happy.
We should be happy for a week, and then we have a chance to rebalance. This is like this is the president's hallmark event, and Mnuchin's blowing it.
Wait a minute. These trade tariffs have been delayed until we don't know when, probably until after June the 12th, when our president meets Kim Jong-un. And we need China's support for those negotiations. There are lots of moving parts here, Brian. You don't suddenly come to an axe falling and it's all over and we win.
Are not Mnuchin.
Listen to Steve Doocy.
All right,
I don't
Stuart,
think
good to see you
Brian
this morning.
likes that guy.
I don't know if you were ready for this. Do you have your coffee
out
yet?
of his league.
I've been ambushed. Is that the new name of the show? Ambush?
All right, pop quiz. Who would you rather have your daughter date? A member of MS-13 or a Republican? I'll give you the answer as a liberal writer stands up and a police officer shouts him down.
Plus, a filmmaker follows the men and women of a task force working to bring every fallen U.S. soldier home. He's joining us with a special look of that incredible story that is coming up next.
Beside my brothers and my sisters, I will proudly take a stand.
We had long deployments now.
In his poignant documentary, Until They Are Home, filmmaker Stephen Barber follows the men and women of the Joint POW MIA Accounting Command, or JPAC, a task force dedicated to recovering the remains of fallen U.S. soldiers. Joins us right now with his insight into this unique task force and its mission, filmmaker Stephen Barber. Stephen, good morning to you.
Well, what an honor. What a pleasure. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about Until They Are Home. Where'd you get this idea?
Well, I was working with a 98-year-old veteran who just passed away. His name's Leon Cooper, and he was a Higginsville commander in the Battle of Tarawa. Because of his vision and his passion, we went out and did a movie with Ed Harris and Kelsey Grammer, and because of that film, we were able to get congressional legislation passed.
Okay, and Stephen, as we look at what is going on here, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, what you're looking at here is basically a repatriation on the island of Tarawa, the atoll of Tarawa. We brought home 2 sets of remains here, but we found a mass grave. And so far, over 60 sets of remains have come home because of the efforts of Vanilla Fire Productions. And Mr. Cooper, who just unfortunately passed away at 98 four months ago, he was the last World War II veteran in the fight.
The fight on Tarawa was terrible, and 500 men were left behind, their bodies.
Right.
And so this is all about trying to bring them home ultimately, which as we come up on Memorial Day, this is what we're all thinking about. You never leave a man behind.
We never leave a man behind. In fact, I met Steve Mnuchin and Thomas Barrack. They took this to President Trump to do a White House screening because we want to bring wounded warriors, we want to bring the families of the MIAs to the White House to do a screening because there's nothing, and I mean there's nothing more important than bringing home our fallen. 88,000 missing from World War II. Let me repeat that, 88,000.
Oh, I know. We've got some of the stats over on the big screen right there. The number of Americans missing in action is unbelievable. World War II, 72,000. Korea, 7,000. Vietnam, 1,500. The Cold War, 126.
Now, out of those, about 40,000 are recoverable. We know right now that there's still 500 folks left on Tarawa because of Mr. Cooper and the hard work that we've been doing. Like I said, 60 sets of remains. We've had 21 funerals. And you know what, Steve? There's no limitations, no statute of limitations on death. When people say, why should we bring these people home? They're dead. It's not about that. It's about the generations that have been waiting for these people to come home for 7 decades. And when you go to a funeral and you watch somebody cry, that has been waiting 72 years.
Sure.
I have no words. It's mind-boggling.
Well, it's a great documentary. If people would like to watch Until They Are Home, it's on Netflix. It's on all sorts of platforms.
Yeah, we sold it to Netflix. It's been on Hulu. It's on Snag Films. We've got it on several platforms, Crackle. Right. But, you know, when people get a chance, if they go to vanillafire.com, they can learn more about the film. And President Trump, if you're watching, we want to get this to the White House.
All right. Stephen.